Hi friends, welcome back or welcome if you're new here. My name is Mali and today we're going to do the oh so daunting task of talking about my favorite books of 2024. I have some coffee reinforcements because we're going to be here a while. Both equally excited but also nervous for this video because I just feel like I'm going to forget so much about these books because some of them I read them at the very beginning of 2024 and I don't want to miss out on talking about something important that could make you read the book. I have here 10 books that I'm going to be talking to you about. These are ranked in no order. The only book that I'm confident about is the number one book. I'll show it at the end. You guys will know which one's the number one. But apart from that, the rest of these books are kind of random. They're kind of in the order that I read them. Let's get started because we're going to be here a little bit. The very first book on my 2024 favorites is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. I think this book kind of started my obsession with dystopian and speculative fiction in 2024. It's definitely a genre that I really got into and that I want to keep exploring in 2025. I actually have another dystopian that made my favorites list. So it's really a genre that I think I really like and that I gel with. So in this one we follow some 40 women who are underground in a bunker. Now, they don't know why they're there and we don't know either. They remember their lives before the bunker, but what happened to lead them to the bunker, they actually have no idea. So the bunker is overseen by some men who feed them and whatever every now and then. Life underground the bunker continues on until one day a alarm sounds off that alerts the guards and there's a huge commotion, and in that commotion the bunker is actually left open so the woman can escape. So for the first time in some, I don't know how many years, the women leave the bunker and above ground life is almost the same as the bunker. They don't know where they are. They don't know why they're there. They're not even sure that they're on Earth anymore. And this is narrated by this girl who she actually was born in the bunker. She's one of the only women in her bunker that don't remember a life beforehand. I think she's only a young, like 20-something-year-old. She has never known anything beyond the bunker. And what made this book a favorite of mine is just the depictions of that loneliness between the women, but also that companionship that they found in each other. I really like the ambiguity of it all. I really like that we didn't get any answers. If you go into this book thinking, oh hell yeah, I'm gonna find out why they were in the bunker, you're not gonna know. You're not gonna know anything. The loneliness in this, the desperation, it floored me. I was left speechless. I could not stop reading this book. I felt so much for this woman who only had memories of a time before, and presently they were stripped to almost nothing. And they built a little community between them that was very heartbreaking but also heartwarming. This definitely is such a quiet little book and I loved it. It's definitely my type of dystopian fiction. If this had like world building, if this had answers, I don't think I would have liked it. I loved the not knowing and I hope you guys do too. If you guys do like a quiet sort of book about grief and love and humanity, definitely pick this up. The next book I have on my list is Monstrilio by Geraldo Samano Cordova. This is literary horror and I love when the word literary is thrown before a word. So like literary horror, literary dystopian, love that. Especially because I find that explores humanity in such a creative and unique way. The point of it is not to focus on the genre or focus on the world building or even focus on you being scared. It focuses on the characters and I love that. So in this one, we follow this woman who, after the death of her son, she carves out a little piece of his lung and she then feeds that lung and the lung becomes its own sentient being. It becomes a little like monster basically, and later down the line it transforms into a human. So it's this really beautiful exploration on grief and family and love and acceptance. I really adore this one, and I can't believe that this is a debut novel. Can't wait for whatever Cordova writes next because I think it's gonna be brilliant. A thing that stood out for me in this novel was its use of POVs. In more like traditional books, POVs kind of like hash out the same events over and over again, just from different characters' perspectives. But in this one, Geraldo uses perspectives in order to propel the story forward. So we get perspectives from everybody in the family. We get perspectives from the mother, Magos, Lena, who's a family friend, Joseph, the father, Monstrilio himself later as a human, and all these perspectives move the story forward. We don't get the same event hashed out, which I found so refreshing. So we get such a giant jump of time, and we really get to look into this families, and I loved it. And I really liked each and every character, especially Magos. I thought her character was so compelling. So many actions that she did were just ones that were so determined as a mother. And I also really like Monstrilio's point of view at the very end. His chapters were a little more gory, more of the horror element. I guess a little trigger warning for that. There's some body horror at the end, some gore. But again, this book doesn't look to shock you. Beautiful novel about grief and family, and I really love this book. This is actually the book that I reread twice in 2024. Once in March and once in December. So that definitely goes to show how much I love this book and how good this book is with a capital G. I am gonna read you guys a little quote because the depictions about grief on the very first page just shook me. Okay, so the quote I'm gonna read you is on the very first page, guys. So it says, "Her son was alive and now he isn't. No thunder, no angels weeping, no cloaked death, no grace, just his silent body, unbreathing, and the blunt realization that this is it." How dull, she thinks. How good is that? Oh my god. There's more beautiful writing like that throughout the entirety of the book. Oh my god, I found another quote that I really like. It says, "We didn't so much exist as much as we haunted, and with no one else to haunt, we haunted each other." This book is really, really good, and take it from me, I read it twice. All right, so this next book should come to no surprise at all if you guys have been following me for just even a little bit. Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. I know, how fucking basic of me to add a Sally Rooney to my favorites of 2024 list. But at the same time, Sally Rooney fucking outdid herself with Intermezzo. I am shocked that this book is on my list because before I started this book, I actually did not think I was gonna like it. I was actually really, really nervous because I have not had the best track record with Sally Rooney. I keep saying this same exact sentence, but like Normal People, I liked. It was okay. Conversation with Friends was my favorite out of all the other books. And then there was Beautiful World, Where Are You? And I hated that book. Then we came to Intermezzo, and this book just took my breath away with how amazing it was and how much she has evolved as a writer and how mature the book feels. All her other books has just been a practice for this one. Obviously, I mean, if a writer is writing 4 books in, their writing has to get better. In Intermezzo, she really takes like every theme that she's been exploring in all her other works: age gap, relationship, love, religion, life, all her philosophy about these things. She's been honing her craft, finally compiled it into one masterful novel, and that was Intermezzo. Do you guys really know this is about Peter and Ivan? They're 2 brothers. They are estranged, and the book opens up with their father's funeral. And after the funeral, the brothers go their separate ways, and we get POVs from both brothers. So we get to know the brothers quite intimately, I will say, and I fucking love that. I am such a character girly, so I love when we get to know a character this well. Peter is a lawyer. He's like in his 30s, and he is battling a drug addiction low-key, and he's sort of dating 2 different women. And I say sorta because the first girl that he's in love with is only a 20-year-old, and he's actively dating her, but then the other woman is this ex that he had a really serious relationship with, but for some reason or other they had to come apart, and he still holds like a little friendship with her. It's very ambiguous friendship though. So he is in love with 2 women, and he's trying to juggle with these 2 women while also trying to juggle the grief with losing his father and his depression. And then we get Ivan's POV, and Oh my god, Ivan. I loved him with my whole heart and being. I don't know. I felt so much for him because he's only a young 20-something-year-old guy, right? And he's kind of socially awkward. Ivan is the chess prodigy of the family. He's a little genius. And it is in one of his chess matches that he meets Margaret. She is this 36-year-old woman, I think it was, that oversees the recreation center that the tournament was in, and the two fall in love, as one does. And so Ivan is now grappling with the fact that he's dating a woman 2 decades older than him, and how that looks upon him, how society looks at relationships like that. I really loved being in the minds of both Peter and Ivan. One thing that really stood out for me in this novel was Sally Rooney's writing style. She really switched things up for us here. So in Peter's point of view, we get this really like tilted, kind of stop and go, staccato type of sentence structure. It's almost like an action list of whatever Peter is thinking of or doing. And then we get to Ivan's POV, which is when the writing opens up again and it's flowing like natural and it's open and it's a little bit more, I would say, emotionally intelligent. I think Ivan is a very emotionally intelligent man, whereas with Peter, he's in the middle of this depression and he just feels very, very suffocated, and his POV really transmits that. I felt that frustration and that suffocation and that desperation when I was reading Peter's POV. And then with Ivan, it kind of felt like a breath of fresh air. Maybe that's why I liked Ivan so much, but I also equally loved Peter though. And you guys can see all of my dog ears. Like oh my god, I highlighted so much. There's so many that I just wrote on and highlighted, and now nothing comes up, of course. But the ending for me was such a tearjerker because, with no spoilers, is that type of ending that is just so hopeful yet heartbreaking, and you get the sense that the characters are okay at the end of the day, you know, that they're living and they're fine and they're okay and they're gonna work things out. If you haven't read this Sally Rooney novel, despite it being the It release of the year, please pick it up. You will not regret doing so. I think this is Sally Rooney at her very best, and I can't wait for whatever else she comes out with. Like, no rush to you, Miss Rooney. Please take your time perfecting your next novel, but like, I'm hungry for it. I need it now. The next book on my list goes to show at how much I loved exploring dystopian and speculative fiction this year, and that is Private Rites by Julia Armfield. I adore Julia Armfield's mind. I don't know what it is, but her writing really puts you at the center of her world. It really transports you to her world. In this one, we follow three sisters who are estranged, but they come together after the death of their father to read his will and do all the details that come with a funeral and a wake. The sisters were also not really close to their father at all. They had a really rocky relationship with him growing up. He was kind of like a big meanie, to be honest with you. So there's a lot of feelings that arises in each of the sisters with the funeral of their father and with his recent passing. And so we get an exploration of that, but we also get such a cool perspective on the girls' world in which they live in, because the world in which they live in is one that is perpetually raining, right? They live in a city where it never stops raining, and we get to see all the struggles that come with that, all the hurdles of everyday daily life that come with that. Now, because it always raining, the city is super flooded. Getting to work on water taxis is now common. There's a lot of power outages because the cables can't hold up. The rain is so bleak, so dreary, so wet. I loved it all. I read this the very start of the fall season. It was perfect because it was very, very gloomy back then, and I was like, oh my god, this is perfect. I feel like I'm in the world. Another really cool thing is that Julia Armfield gave us POV chapters of the city itself, so we got to see the city quite literally falling apart from its own perspective, and I thought it was so freaking cool. So yeah, this novel is part dystopian and part grief. I really love an exploration of grief in a very unique sort of way. So I love this. I adored this one. I also thought that the girls' grief and the girls' really fragmented relationship with their father was really relatable. Not to get to TMI, not to trauma dump on anybody, but I am a girl with father issues. To see father issues in fiction, I eat that shit up. I related a lot to how the sisters felt about their father, on how growing up in their father's house, they had to like tiptoe around him and they had to sort of like learn to grow up and take care of each other. It hit a little close to home. What really stood out for me was definitely the atmosphere and the world that Julia Armfield created with her masterful pen. I really love Julia Armfield's work with water. I don't know why she's so interested with water, but I love that. Keep doing that, babe. Oh my god, I'm gonna read you guys this quote, and it's literally like the epitome of father issues. Looking like her father is frankly bad enough. She can't explain it, except to say that the thought of looking like someone seems only a prelude to the thought of acting like them. Next on my list is All Fours by Miranda July, and Miranda July put back the faith in weird girl literature for me this year. Quite recently, I've been saying a lot that I'm over the sad girl genre, and that is true. I especially hate the genre because it's overdone, babes. I feel like since like 2020, we've been doing this shit, and I'm really over it, especially because it's not really saying anything new anymore. And Miranda July heard me, and she said, I got you, babes. And she wrote this. We follow this woman who is determined to drive across the country. So from LA to New York City, she's gonna do it alone, and she's gonna come back and tell the tale. Except she doesn't do that. She goes off on day one. She drives from 30 minutes away from her house. She stays at a hotel and stays there for the entirety of what was supposed to be her big New York City birthday trip. And she lies about it to her family to make it seem like she is in New York City. And this hotel she stays in is a dingy little thing, by the way, but she transforms it to being a pink palace, passion palace. I don't know how to describe it, but she literally renovates the hotel and makes it her own little heaven in the middle of nowhere. And it is in that motel, in that town where the motel is, that she begins a affair with this guy, but it never got sexual. So that's the bare bones of this novel. If we go a little deeper, we get to know that our main character is actually a 40 to 50-year-old woman. She is entering menopause. She's entering the ending cycle of her fertility. She's not really looked at with pleasure or with want or desire anymore. So when someone does look at her like that, she feels reborn again. And I really like this exploration on aging and the worries that come with that. I just found it so wonderfully weird and magical. It is really weird in true Miranda July fashion, but it's also very human and very beautiful. And just, I really liked our main character, and see her get what you wanted. It's queer, and I loved it. So yes, our main character spirals, but she finds herself again, and she redefines what it means to be a family. The writing in this is so funny. Like, there are so many moments in the same paragraph, by the way, where Miranda July will write something so hauntingly human and beautiful and raw, and then ended with a really comical singer that will have you laughing. And I really liked her usage of an older main character. I feel like we can use some more of that in fiction. I think the fiction world is overdone with 20-something-year-olds. Let's get another perspective, babe. Next, we have a novel that if I had to rank my favorites of 2024, this one will be on my top 5. And I'm talking about If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English by Noor Naga. This is a book that I read all the way back in summer, and I still think about it. I was 20 pages in, I was obsessed with it. Bear with me, because now we're entering the books that I read at the very start of 2024, and that's where my memory gets a little foggy. Basically, in this one, we follow two different people who fall in love. First one is an Egyptian American woman who goes back to Egypt trying to find her identity, trying to reconnect with that part of herself that she doesn't really know about when she was in America. And then we have our love interest, the boy, who is this poor village boy who came into Cairo a little bit before the revolution, and he was a big photographer during that revolution, but ever since he's been poor and been struggling with drug addiction. And I don't know how these two fall in love, but they do, and they make a very interesting couple, a very quite toxic couple. This is not a love story in any shape, but we do get pages of their brief affair and how it all falls apart. This book is very interesting in its formatting. I remember part one is formatted as sort of like a question and answer type of thing. Throughout the entire novel, we get POVs of both characters. So like one chapter will be her point of view, and then the next chapter will be his point of view. And I say chapters very, very loosely because chapters are like literally like page and a half. So that being said, even though we do get frequent POV changes, you never get lost and you never not know who's talking. Oh my god, the end of the book is where this entire thing was flipped on its head for me, and I was really doubting what the hell I just read. I can't wait to reread this book with the ending in mind. I think Norinaga's writing is absolutely spectacular in this novel. I really liked how she just transported me to Cairo. Perfume and Pain by Anna Dorn. This one has a spot in my favorites list because I could not stop thinking about this novel ever since I read it. I kid you not, I read this novel in about a day. I read 200 pages almost compulsively because I could not stop reading this. I finished this novel at 3 a.m. I have never done that before in my life. At my ripe age of 24, I cannot do that. I have a bedtime and I go to sleep at that bedtime. I don't care if I have 3 pages left to finish my book. If I'm sleepy, I am going to sleep. But with this novel, I physically could not do that. So in this one, we follow our main character whose name is Astrid, and she is a quite famous author. She's known for her sapphic stories, and she herself is a lesbian, and she has been quite recently canceled for something controversial that she said, advised to stay low by her agency, and she's like, okay, fine, whatever. And she takes it as an opportunity to like get healthy, work on herself, and reflect on what she did and get started on her other novel. But all of this is put on pause once she gets involved with two very different women, one of them being a fellow writer and PhD student, and the other one is actually her oh so annoying neighbor. I love this one. Obviously, it's on my favorites of 2024 list, right? But this was such a fun, sexy, hilarious, rompy novel. I adored each and every page of this book. This was very different from what I usually read just because it's much more contemporary than literary. But I ate this up, babes. I ate this up. I love this. I love Astrid. She was so funny. I also really liked that as a character, I was rooting for her despite how fucked up she was and how rude she was sometimes. But I wanted her to get healthy. I wanted her to get better. I wanted her to get ahead. I love the romance between her and our main love interest, Penelope. There's so many scenes where they're so fucking cute together, but also Astrid was so dense about her, and I'm like, girl, you clearly like her. She clearly likes you. Just kiss. This book is so fun. It's also, because it is contemporary, it's so easy to read. So if you pick this up, I bet that you won't stop reading until you finish it. We're on my top 3 books of the year, and I am pretty confident with how they're ranked right now. The book that's on 3rd place for my favorites of 2024 is Crooked Plow by Itamar Vieira Jr. This was longlisted for the International Booker in 2024, and that's how I knew about this book. I adore the Booker list because it always introduces me to so many cool authors that I never will have heard about, especially the international one. Definitely a list that I will pay attention to closely in 2025. This one is translated from Brazilian Portuguese. This is something that you will not get in English fiction today. So the bare bones of this novel is that you follow these twin sisters, and I think it was. I actually don't remember if they're twin sisters, but they're definitely sisters. So one day they're playing and they're getting to their grandmother's things, and they're not supposed to be playing with their grandmother's things, especially because she does have a knife in there. So they begin playing with a knife, and there is a accident in which one of the sisters, we don't really get to know who until much later in the novel, one of the sisters' tongue is cut off almost completely. The sisters' dynamic completely changed from that point on, and they become more intertwined together, especially because the other sister who still has her tongue intact. It's sort of like the voice for the sister who lost her tongue. There's also this setting that makes it very, very interesting because the sisters and the sisters' family are actually just a couple generations removed from slaves, but ethically there still are because they have to work to live in the plantations that they work in. So after slavery was abolished, all these slaves didn't really have anywhere to go. So they more often than not would stay at the plantations that they used to work in, and they earned very meager, if not any types of earnings. They just worked in order to live there. Anything that they owned was not actually there. So like they could not really build any structures with durability. They had to build mud structures that would need constant repairs. They could only grow things to feed themselves, and even so, the farmer owners will take whatever they wanted from them. That's the setting, and that's how our two sisters live. You get this look into this plantation village, and you get a look into the sisters' lives. And quite honestly, this book really reminded me of My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. The exploration of sisterhood, especially one that's so bonded together. The look into all the other villagers and the families also reminded me of My Brilliant Friend. It was also this very type of like quiet writing, yet beautiful, yet simplistic. It just reminded me a lot of My Brilliant Friend, and it wasn't marketed as like, oh, for fans of My Brilliant Friend, because I find that a lot of books that are marketed that way fall short. I didn't come into this book thinking, oh, this is gonna be like My Brilliant Friend. I just found these connections quite organically, and I really liked that. I also really loved how expansive it was. We really did follow the sisters from like early childhood until adulthood, until they got married, and we got to see their lives when they were married and how much better or worse it was. I love that. This is also another aspect that reminded me of My Brilliant Friend because we got to see the characters grow up for decades. So the book that's on my second spot for favorite of 2024 is The Mermaid of Black Conch by Monique Roffey. This book is set in the Caribbean, and if you guys don't know, I am from the Caribbean. I live in Puerto Rico, which is in the Caribbean. I really connected with that part of the story. In this one, we follow this fisherman who lives in this fictional island in the Caribbean, and he comes across this mermaid because his island is hosting like a fishing tournament, and these white men basically pull out this mermaid from the ocean and they have her as a sort of trophy, and the fisherman feels bad for the mermaid who is strung up and is almost dying, and so he rescues her from the white men and he takes her back to his own house. It is at his house that she begins to transform back into a young woman, and from then on we get to see the fisherman and the mermaid's young love blossoming. But of course, things cannot always stay the way that they are. I love this novel so much because of that connectivity to the Caribbean. The Mermaid had a whole mesh of different myths, but mostly it had a lot of like Taino legends, which if you guys don't know, Tainos were indigenous people of Puerto Rico. Sadly, they're not around anymore. Like fucking Christopher Columbus killed all the Tainos that we used to have in Puerto Rico. So like there's not even reservations like there are for North Americans in America. I don't know where that history lesson came from, but it was so tender for me to see Taino legends, Taino words in this novel. This is also written in bad English, which is like Caribbean English, and I know a thing or two of Caribbean English because my father speaks Caribbean English. He is Haitian, so there is a lot of words and phrases and particulars that they say in this novel that I would hear in my father's voice because I've heard him speak like that almost my entire life. I really have to read more books set in the Caribbean or books by more Caribbean authors. My top book of 2024. This book is so special to me, so I know I'm gonna give it a misservice in talking about this book because this book is actually nonfiction. So there is really no plot for me to talk to you guys about. I'm talking about Little Weirds by Jenny Slate. This is no surprise to you if you have been following me. This memoir is really hard to speak about without sounding cringy because at the heart of this memoir, it is the gratefulness and the joy with being alive and falling in love with self-love. And that just sounds so fucking cringy, but I swear to you that it's not. This novel is so perfect for a new year, for a new beginning in your life. Maybe you're going through a big transition in your life. You can also read this at the start of spring. This book is very spring coded. In this memoir, you will fall in love with Jenny Slate's way of seeing things. It really is so magical, so weird, so charming. It's really like childlike, but in a good way. Like, if you want some of your childhood whimsy back, please read this novel. This book was just perfect for me to start the new year with, because at the start of every year, I am so filled with so much hope for all that I could be in the new year. And I'm always so inspired and so creative. And that book really fueled those feelings in me. I am gonna read you guys a couple of quotes because I think that's the only way I can talk to you guys into reading this book if you have it in your TBR. I know that Jenny Slate is a celebrity and maybe you're kind of adamant or kind of worry about picking up celebrity books, but I swear this is the only one that's worth it. It's not about her being a celebrity at all. Felt like Jenny Slate was like in my head a little bit, because I consider myself to be quite a sentimental person. Like, it doesn't take much for me to cry or to feel things deeply, and I feel like Jenny Slate equally feels things as strongly as I do. She just came across as such an empathetic person. So this is the quote that I read and that I constantly think about, and I think is like the perfect quote to really encompass what is a little weird. So the quote reads, "And I see the leaves turn a bit in the air, and the breeze coming in feels like the whole world is a pet that is breathing on me. And I think, well, I am so sensitive and I'm very fragile, but so is everything else. And living with a dangerous amount of sensitivity is sort of what I have to do sometimes. And it is so very much better than living with no gusto at all. And I'd rather live with a tender heart, because that is the key to finding the beat of all the other hearts." I just love that philosophy of living softly and living tenderly and just feeling as much as you can feel and not being ashamed of being a sentimental person. I'm gonna read you guys something else. You're basically gonna hear me read the entire book to you guys. Buckle up. This entire page I love. So she's basically talking about how she was born on March 25th, which is like the very beginning of spring and the end of winter. It's when those two come together and things are like coming alive again. Animals are coming of hibernation. Things are growing and sprouting and living again. And that's what she's talking about here. And it says, "I was born at exactly the time when anything alive is saying, 'Let me burst. Let me get to the most beautiful and ornamental and essential version of what I can be. Give me space to bloom and present the blossoms to an ecosystem that will drink from my nectar. Celebrate my petals, sniff me, pick me, take me home, make your body smell like my lovely scent.' I was born during the moment in the cycle when almost every single live thing is inclined to mate, to grow, to point a snout skyward and sniff the air, to create. In the very grooves of my being is the desire to bust open, and the certainty that it is right to begin to live again, even after long periods of cold and darkness." I think this is a book that I will always reread. Talking about it right now makes me just want to reread it right fucking now. I just completely adore this book. It really touched my soul. It touched the very being of myself, and I felt like sometimes what I think about and how I feel was put on words. Am I a little teary-eyed after talking about Jenny Slate? Yes, I am. So that were my favorites of 2024. I feel like I had such a good reading year. It was a year that I read 100 books for the very first time. I dared myself to do that and I did it, and I feel very proud of myself. I read so many cool genres, so many cool iterations of literary fiction that I really enjoyed. Can't wait to have another great reading year in 2025. I'm super excited that I'm gonna be documenting almost all of that journey, because I definitely plan on uploading every week for you guys and just like having more reading vlogs and reading wrap-ups and talking about books that I read. And I'm really excited for 2025. I can't wait to make this video again next year and see which books touched my soul in 2025. Yeah, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me in this video, and thank you guys for hearing me passionately talk about these books. If you have read any of these and you felt the same way, let me know. If you guys hated these books, I don't want to fucking hear it. respectfully, keep it to yourself. I think these books are perfect and you should too. I'm kidding. If you guys have different opinions than me, that's fine. You can tell me down below. Let me know what your favorites were. If you have a top 3, please let me know. They could be in a video. That's all I will say. See you guys very, very soon. Bye.